And now the big moment is here to introduce Herminia, who has worked for DSHS for over 36 years. Absolutely amazing on that. Through the years, she has weaved her passion for immigration policy, continuous improvement, technology, equity, and belonging into every position she has held. She is currently a strategic alignment administrator for the Access, Impact, and Mobilization team at the Department of Social and Health Services. Herminia is a learner. She has credentials as a certified public manager, certified trainer, certified instructional designer, and certified diversity executive. She graduated last year with her Master's of Arts degree. Congratulations, Herminia. Outside of work, she pursues justice at the intersection of race and faith. She has been a keynote speaker, a workshop facilitator, a panelist at conference and college campuses. She believes in the power of story and leads bilingual story circle workshops to support immigrant leaders. Her grandchildren call her Lita, or short for Abuelita. She enjoys family traditions like making tortillas and tamales. She acknowledges that none of us travel alone. Our ancestors come with us. Now it is time. I have the special privilege of introducing you to my colleague, my dear friend, and a wonderful human being that we all respect and appreciate because she puts passion into everything she does and is so humble about it in the process. Allow me to introduce you to Herminia Esqueda.
Gracias, Lolo. Buenos días.
Yes.
Me llamo Herminia Esqueda, pronouns she, her, ella. I have brown skin, long, wavy black hair with gray highlights, and wear black rimmed glasses. I am wearing a traditional Mexican dress, purple with white embroidery. And today, as we focus on belonging and home, exploring equity through location and migration, we are going to focus on belonging of farm worker families in Eastern Washington. In an effort to make this a belonging space, I like to do an exercise. In a minute, we are going to open the chat before getting started this morning, and we're going to celebrate language. I don't just believe in language access and language justice. I believe in language celebration. If you are bilingual or multilingual, or you happen to know a greeting in a language other than English, could you please type that greeting in the chat? Buenos días, hola, bonjour. Oh, I love it so much. Yes, the emojis too. Sign language, thank you. I knew your cameras would be off, so I wasn't sure how to incorporate sign language, but you figured it out. Love it so, so much. For those of you who only speak English, this is not an exercise of exclusion. This is an exercise of inclusion and belonging. For those who have to navigate English-only spaces all day long and never get a space where they can feel like they can truly belong. And if that made you uncomfortable, that's okay. Lean in. Learning is uncomfortable. That's why our head hurts at the end of a training or a workshop. I hope you lean in today. But if I say something that feels uncomfortable because it feels re-traumatizing, because the experience maybe is a little too close, please feel free to step away. That is not the intent, but I understand as we explore lived experiences that something may hit that you did not expect. So please take care of yourselves. Today, we're going to talk about, or our agenda is we're going to talk about migration, immigration, familia, and belonging. I am a Chicana, Tejana, living in Eastern Washington since I graduated college from the University of Idaho and got married and started working for DSHS. It will be 37 years on July 1st. I am trilingual. I speak English, Spanish, and Spanglish. Yes, Spanglish is a language. My grandkids do call me Lita. Thank you, Lola, for calling that out. And my presentation comes from my lived experience, research, and informed observations. Today, we will talk about migration, immigration, familia, and belonging. And I just want to share what Justice Whitener said yesterday, that we need to remember. And today, we are going to remember. By the end of today, hopefully, you will be able to identify systemic bias, know the difference between migration and immigration, learn about the Latine impact on the state of Washington and beloved community. According to National Geographic, migration is the regular movement of individuals, groups, or animals from one location to another. This beautiful mural is called Migration is Beautiful, where hope takes flight. And it was painted by artist Brenda Melgoza Ciardiello and located in Fort Worth, Texas. I reached out to her just to be sure that I could use her painting as my background for this slide, and she said yes. The mural depicts, this is from her website in her words, the mural depicts monarch butterflies and native Mexican Texan milkweed and reads migration is beautiful across the top. She said, through this mural, I hope to inspire reflection on what it means to migrate or have free movement. I am confronting the contradictory associations the word migration tends to bring up. This is especially important here in Texas, where we are very much implicated in ongoing discussions regarding Central American migration into the United States and a source of great discord. And simultaneously, we are in the direct migratory path of the monarch butterfly, something we openly celebrate even as we destroy the monarch's habitats. These contradictions hit at the root of our problematic anthropocentric relationship with the natural world, as well as a need to engage more wholly with ideas of coexistence, symbiosis, and kindness in the modern world. So, migration is natural. Per Gael Garcia Bernal, he says, migration is as natural as breathing, as eating, as sleeping. It is part of life and part of nature. You can see it in the image on the top right of the locations where monarch butterflies have been observed and the migration path they need to take to return home to Mexico. Monarch butterflies migrate freely across the Americas in search of safer habitats. The human profile in each of the butterfly's wings highlights the courage and resiliency of people who, like the monarch butterfly, migrate across human-made political borders. Artist Fabiana Rodriguez. Look her up. I didn't get an opportunity to reach out to her and show some of her art. Migration is communal and natural. Native peoples left an indelible imprint on the land with systems of roads that tied nations and communities together across the entire landmass of the Americas. This is America. Scholar David Waite Chambers writes, these trail systems were not just for migration, but for trading. So much so that they formed these trail systems and roadways throughout the Americas, east and west, north and south. These trailways and roadways were used for short and long distance travel. They were along the Pacific coast and along the rivers, and they formed a network of indigenous nations based on advanced agriculture, Early pioneers and colonial explorers relied on local indigenous guides and path knowledge. However, they frequently claimed These trails were new discoveries or pioneer roads without adequately crediting the original native engineers. These roads were our map to our current highways. Let's give them credit. This from the book in Indigenous Peoples. And this is a map of language, culture and language before colonization. Because we cannot talk about migration without talking about language. Hundreds of languages were spoken throughout the Americas. This map is just the USA, but Indigenous peoples lived throughout all of the Americas. The continent was richly populated with Native American communities, and hundreds of thousands of people lived in a wide range of environments from shore to shore, each community and nation with its own distinct culture. Until the centuries that followed the arrival of Europeans after 1492 were years of tremendous loss from disease, starvation, and bloodshed, all driven by a relentless expansion of U.S. settlements. And then in 1619, the arrival of the first pirate ship carrying 20 enslaved Africans, which now expands migration and a definition that's supposed to be so beautiful and natural to forced migration and forced displacement, which is not natural and was not voluntary. While migration is the regular movement of individuals and groups from one location to another, and beautiful and natural, forced migration is a different story. Forced migration is not voluntary. There's something or someone forcing them to migrate. And these are just a few examples. The indigenous displacement and Trail of Tears, millions of African people kidnapped and enslaved, forced removal and incarceration of Japanese Americans, mass deportation of Mexicans and Mexican Americans, the Great Migration, relocation of 6 million Black Americans who were escaping systemic racial violence, asylees and refugees fleeing war and violence, and we can't forget the Hawaii and Puerto Rico diaspora. Warsan Shire says in her poem, Home, no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. This is forced migration. Migration stops or is limited when borders and laws are created that codify who belongs and who does not belong. Many say that our immigration system is broken. Or is it working as designed? Let's take a trip down memory lane and find out. I love this quote by George Erasmus, an Aboriginal leader from Canada, and one that Mark Charles uses in his book about the doctrine of discovery. Where community is to be formed, common memory must be created. Again, like Justice Whitmore said, we need to remember. Let's remember. So this is a high-level overview of the history of our immigration system, all the way back to 1776. We're not going to cover it all. We've codified who is included and who is excluded. We've created an immigration system that was clearly designed with a specific national identity in mind. All the yellow boxes are immigration laws that were written to exclude based on race, ethnicity, and nationality. The green boxes are immigration laws that expanded who was included. I'm not going to cover every box. This is just a high-level review, but I am going to focus on a few that impact our Latine community today. Let's start with the Declaration of Independence. It proudly declares all men are created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet, 1/5 of the population at that time was enslaved. 41 out of 56 of the signers, including Thomas Jefferson, were enslavers. There was a passage condemning the slave trade that was part of the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, but it was removed from the final draft to appease Southern colonies. And through its silence, it then condones slavery and completely erases and excludes Native Americans. Thomas Jefferson has this quote: "We have the wolf by the ear, speaking of slavery, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is on one scale, and self-preservation is on the other scale." Self-preservation for who? We're going to find out. The very first immigration law is the Naturalization Act of 1790 that codified who belongs in the US and who should be considered a citizen. And this is where we clearly see that all men are not created equal. The Nationality Act of Citizenship limited it to free white persons, specifically free white property owning men. And why wasn't citizenship so important? Because citizenship meant land, the right to vote, and the right to speak. Who was it created for, and who belongs? A few years later, the very next immigration law was intended to exclude. A ban on immigration of free Black people. Exclusion codified from the very beginning in 1803, because there were Black free Haitians that they didn't want coming into the US and messing up the system. But it set a foundation for future immigration laws, a system created to support who will own land and who will do the labor. Coincidentally, in the same year, the Louisiana Purchase. So now there's land. Who gets to own that land? Whoever is considered a citizen. It codified and established racial and social hierarchies. This is what we mean when we talk about systemic racism and systemic bias. Excluded African Americans, excluded Native Americans, and non-white immigrants, in addition to women and indentured servants. The law set the foundation for future US nationality laws and influencing future legislation. Birthright citizenship is also established, but for who? For the children of the said free white men. These racial restrictions were not eliminated completely until, guess when? Partly eliminated in 1952 and not completely until 1965, the year I was born. In order for these European American asylees to own land, they needed land. So the next law, the 1830 Indian Removal Act, sanctioned the forced removal of Native American tribes from their lands. Many died from disease and starvation, exposure, and genocide, and the population declined from millions to thousands, including this move to California while it was still Mexico. And Mexico had already abolished slavery in 1829. So because of these anti-slavery laws, Mexico had a strict refusal to return any runaway enslaved people. The country served as the destination for thousands of freedom-seeking, escaping enslaved people from the American South. The Underground Railroad actually went to Mexico. Did you know that? The Battle of the Alamo was an effort to preserve slavery. That doesn't get told. And when Mexico abolished slavery, it threatened the economic livelihood of Texas and the US. There's a letter from Stephen Austin to Mexico City that says, it's about the money. Black labor is necessary. There you go. It's about the money and free labor. In 1846, which was before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, General Fremont led the Sacramento Massacre, stealing land and killing indigenous communities. Settler violence wiped out indigenous tribes while the land was still Mexico. And then on February 1st, 1948, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo annexed half of Mexico's territory. In return, Mexicans were promised U.S. citizenship for the tens of thousands of Mexicans that were living there, and the treaty added an additional 525,000 square miles to the U.S., including the land that makes up all or part of present-day Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Mexico also gave up all claims to Texas and recognized the Rio Grande River as America's southern border. Used to be up here at the top where the red line is, and now moved down to the Rio Grande River. The Mexicans living in those parts of the country were now living in the U.S. without ever crossing a border, including my Tejano familia. The border literally crossed us. We never crossed a border. But the treaty was undermined, no surprise, in several distinct ways. Like many treaties before that, promises were broken. Mexicans lost their ancestral ranch lands. Native Americans were excluded from any protection. There was linguistic erasure. Spanish may be the language of the Spanish colonizer. Our indigenous languages were erased, but Spanish is still my native tongue and my first language as it was theirs. And that was erased also. Language twice erased. Anti-Mexican mob lynchings, which I blurred the picture but wanted to show that it's true. La Matanza, a period when Texas Rangers, the purpose of the Texas Rangers was to remove Mexicanos from their land. And what they called Juan Crow laws of segregation, where we serve whites only and no Spanish or Mexicans. Stories that my parents and my mom have told us about what happened to them while living in Texas. And that sets the stage for what happens next. The U.S. now has land all the way to the Pacific coast. Who is going to do the work? Chinese labor. They arrived to pan and mine for gold in the California gold rush. They work on the railroads, they work on the farmlands. But because of severe discrimination, many became entrepreneurs, which they're known for even today. But it was only a matter of time that there was a backlash. The Chinese were blamed for declining wages and job shortages. So how do we stop them? Through more exclusionary immigration laws. In 1875, that was specific to Chinese women, saying that they were sexual and promiscuous and accused them of prostitution. And then in 1882, a complete exclusion of Chinese. Immigrants have been used as political pawns since before the 1800s. Blamed for the economy, blamed for lost jobs, and what do? We create more laws of exclusion. So then at the same time that there was exclusion, there's inclusion, because 10 years later, Ellis Island opens. Immigrants to the USA landing at Ellis Island served as the main immigration point for the US from 1892 to 1943 and processed some 20 million immigrants, mostly European. And then what happens? Somebody has to do the work. Chinese are not being allowed in. So because there's a labor shortage and World War I causes US dependence on who? Mexican agricultural labor. And what happens? Just like the Chinese. Soon we have the Great Depression, and we then get blamed for taking jobs. 1.8 million were deported, 60% US citizen. Mass deportation is not new. This was the very first of 3 efforts of mass deportation of just Mexicans. That does not count the exclusion, deportation of other ethnicities and nationalities. The Los Angeles manager in 1931 said, "It is a question of pigment, not a question of citizenship or right." And then again, there's another labor shortage. World War II. Who is removed now? The Japanese are sent to concentration camps. And we open up the bracero program, where braceros migrate to the Pacific Northwest from 1942 to 1965 to fill that labor shortage. Mexican workers wanted in October in the newspapers. The Yakima Chamber of Commerce even thanks the President of Mexico for sending braceros and coming to the aid in the harvesting of vital foods grown in this area. 4.6 million entered the country legally between 1942 and 1964. Many of them returned because this was temporary without even getting paid. Many were taken advantage of, and yet still many stayed. Now we see the influx of Latine families, Mexican families into Washington state, specifically Eastern Washington, where some are starting now to stay because many of them were treated poorly in Texas, and Mexican government refused to send any workers to the state anymore. The program was popular with the farmers. It was extended, and some decided to stay and make this home because it was too dangerous to go back home or to go back to Texas. But also to mention that even after the attack on Pearl Harbor, it was Mexican Americans that enlisted in the military in significant numbers. A Texas man explained, "I was born in Mexico myself too, but I raised my kids and have to fight for my country." Mexican Americans were awarded more than 30 congressional medals of honor. And yet, we have a second mass deportation. 1954, 1.3 million were deported, up to 60% US citizens. Why? Because now we are called an invasion. Does that language sound familiar? Contributing to crime and disease, displacing domestic labor and veterans, and lowering the wages and affecting work conditions. How history repeats itself. And again, there is a labor shortage. So in 1965, finally some immigration reform. This is really the very last time that there is true immigration reform. The year that I was born. It created pathways for family reunification. Limited pathway that still exists today. We have not created more pathways. That is why we are where we are at today. There was the Immigration Reform Act in 1986, but those were undocumented immigrants were granted amnesty, but a new path was not created. We allowed those who had been working here to be granted amnesty, but and added punishment for the employers, and we enhanced border security, but we created no new paths. So guess what's still going to happen? Because there was no reform and no additional pathways created. We have not had immigration reform in 60 years, but yet in the state of Washington, we have 15 million acres of farmland that produce 300 different crops. It is a $12.8 billion industry that requires 145,000 skilled, not unskilled, skilled farm workers during peak season. 70% of farm workers are born in another country, and yet the H-2A visa workers are under 36,000. The fact is, undocumented labor force is the backbone of the fruit industry. The priority must be to defend the jobs and expand the legal protections of the existing farm worker population, said De Loera, who represents the United Farm Workers. They are not the enemy. They are not the criminals. They are the victims of this system that was not created with them in mind. Many of these workers who originally find essential agricultural roles are aging out of the physically intensive work, while others who settled in the US seek year-round, higher-paying jobs. It's not my family doing it anymore. This decline in available labor has created a stark imbalance as agricultural demands grow, especially with modern high-density planting techniques requiring more intensive care and more skilled farm workers. And yet, we've seen that after every labor shortage, there is an effort to recruit Mexican labor, to recruit migrant labor. And yet, that is not what we did this time. Executive orders call for a third, not first, not second, a third mass deportation. And I think of that Thomas Jefferson quote. We have the wolf, which now we're no longer talking about slavery, but we're still talking about labor. And the immigration system, that we can neither hold them nor safely let him go. Justice is on one scale and self-preservation is on the other. And again, I ask, self-preservation for who? Same language, same rhetoric, same dehumanizing narratives. A friend of Kat Armas in her book, gosh, I can't think of her book. It's probably here something about empire, says, stories form narratives, narratives form ideologies, and ideologies form systems. That is the strategy. Use the rhetoric, dehumanize people, dehumanize humans, create a narrative that blames them for the cost of housing, high crime, taking our jobs, low wages, and the system will follow. And what do we see today? No due process. It is legal to racially profile based on the way we look, the way we speak, and where we work. Families living in fear, military-style kidnappings, and inhumane detention centers. Never thought we would see it again and return to the times of the first and second mass deportations. But if systems do not change, history repeats itself because systems are perpetual unless they are disrupted, regardless of who is in leadership. But we still fight. El pueblo unido nunca será vencido. Immigrant protestings are happening. We're calling our legislatures. We're forcing them to consider laws. Immigrants are welcome here. Faith communities are joining together, saying we love our neighbor. People of faith choose love over cruelty. United Farm Workers is still active, and there, Dolores Huerta in her 90s is still fighting. What excuse do we have? We continue to fight via protest, standing in solidarity with our neighbor, calling our representatives, and sharing our history. We can't disrupt systems that we do not remember how they were built and who they were built for. This is how we became the largest, three of the largest Latine counties in the country. Look at this. Look at who we are. The green represents majority Hispanic or Latino by race counties. No surprise, all over the Southwest. But yet there's three counties north of the Southwest, all in the state of Washington. Adams, Grant, and Yakima counties. This, when the Los Angeles mayor said it's about skin color, I believe that. I don't believe it has anything to do with immigration. This is what they are afraid of. In 2060, projections are that the Hispanic population will grow to 119 million. The median age for Hispanics is 31.2 compared to white Americans of 43.2. So who is going to be having the kids of this next generation? But I am proud to see the green up in Washington State. The next part is now we're going to talk about story, about belonging. Why is it that after all this migrant farm worker movement, that I was part of that in Idaho, but I don't see any green counties in Idaho. People chose to stay and bring community and raise their families in these 3 counties in Eastern Washington. So this presentation actually came about because I was inspired by some photographs that I saw on Facebook. From the Irwin Nash photographs of the Yakima Valley migrant labor from 1967 to 1976. Irwin Nash has over 10,000 photos that he took here in the Yakima Valley, spanning from 67 to 75. He was a commercial photographer. He took black and white images of the valley's Latinx and indigenous farm workers, documenting daily labor, the migrant camps, the rise of agricultural labor movement. But the beautiful thing is he didn't see us as labor. He saw us as people. And just beautiful photos that I'm going to share that he took of that time period. The entire collection has been digitized and is accessible. The link is in the slide deck that's available on the site for the conference called the WSU Irwin Nash Images of Migrant Labor Collection. And this was his quote when asked why he took all these pictures. He said, "I don't like to see people suffer. And it's worse when they suffer because of racial and ethnic reasons." And he wanted to be part of the movement to change that. He wanted to take pictures of the protests and the advocacy and the justice. He also said, "From what I saw, they weren't being treated like human beings. They were treated like tools, almost like animals to help in the crops, because all the system has looked at us as labor." The top picture is Guadalupe Gamboa from Sunnyside on the left and Michael Fox, an attorney, clasping hands the morning after they were arrested for going into a labor camp to help farm workers organize for better living and working conditions. And on the bottom left is Guadalupe Gamboa and Michael Fox standing up. And on the bottom right is Irwin Nash before he passed away last year. And I cannot talk about the Chicano movement, which we're going to see next, without talking about the civil rights movement. One of the first pieces of fighting that we did was this Mendez versus Westminster in 1947. The Chicano movement really started there, that fought for desegregation of schools in California, and was actually used as precedents for the Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which the civil rights movement then continued throughout the 50s and 60s, and they broke down walls and opened doors for the Chicano movement to then fight throughout the 60s and the 70s. From the Delano grape strike to student protests and fighting and protesting against the murder of journalist Ruben Salazar, known to be labeled as a radical by the FBI. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of this, what was happening nationally, before I talk about what was happening locally. And the word Chicano, I identify as a Chicana Tejana, signaled a rejection of a Mexican-American identity that accepted assimilation and shunned their cultural roots. Because our parents taught us to assimilate for protection and for survival, to not speak the language. Just calladita más bonita. Chicano reflects their commitment to a new political consciousness, self-respect, and pride in our cultural background. So this is now Eastern Washington history. Washington State Chicano movement. I love this picture of Tomás Villanueva because I got to work with Tomás Villanueva much later than this picture. And so here he is, so young. And I got to learn in my research just how impactful he was to our community. He co-founded the United Farm Worker Cooperative in Toppenish, Washington, the very first activist Chicano organization in the state of Washington. Also proud to be connected with the history of the University of Washington Black Student Union, who traveled to the Yakima Valley in the summer of 1968 to recruit the first major group of Chicanos to the University of Washington. That is what it is about. We cannot do any of this work alone. It impacts all of us. And Black students came to the Yakima Valley and said, we need Chicanos at the University of Washington. And they started in the fall of 1968, that very first group. 68 to 70, another piece of history that connects us as state employees. The Brown Berets came to the Yakima Valley and organized marches to protest the racist and insensitive practices of the staff at the welfare office, also known as DSHS, in Yakima. In 1973, African American and Chicano students joined together, occupied a building at Yakima Valley College, demanding the establishment of an ethnic studies program and the hiring of Black and Chicano counselors. And then in 1979, Radio Cadena, I'll talk about them a little bit later, is established as a Spanish language public radio station here in Granger. And in 1980, 20 Asian and Chicano University of Washington students, go UW, occupy the offices of Vice President Herman Lujan, demanding an end to the new admissions program that placed a limit on how many number of minority students could be admitted, and demanded his resignation. More of that can be found on the timeline located at the link that you can find on the slide deck. And then also proud that Dolores Huerta came to Washington to help us protest. These are images of Dolores Huerta standing outside Safeway in Seattle, holding a sign to the shoppers that said, please do not patronize. This store has unfair grape work, is unfair. Grape Workers United, Farm Workers, AFL-CIO. And then I had to post this flyer, this pink flyer that looks like somebody, it was handwritten, typewritten on a manual typewriter, boycotting the local Safeway here in Sunnyside for the very same reasons. Talk about mobilization in Sunnyside and in Seattle, boycotting Safeway. And then pointing out that the life expectancy, I mean, they wrote a little newspaper article. Life expectancy for migrant farm workers is 49 years. Infant and maternal mortality rates are 125% higher than the national average, and they have a 260% higher death rate from tuberculosis, and on, informing our community. These protests were all along the Yakima Valley. Farm worker women were protesting in Mapton, Huelga. In Sunnyside, Washington, they had farm worker meetings there at the local park. Bill Nicasio, I think he also just recently passed away, also protesting with his sign that says Huelga, please don't break the picket line. He was the vice president of the United Farm Workers Union here in Washington State. His commitment to social justice and tireless efforts to improve the lives of farm workers have left a permanent mark on all over Washington State. And I got to watch a video. I just didn't have time today to show that video. And I love this one. Again, University of Washington students. El Teatro del Piojo. Yes, that means the theater of the louse was named to reclaim a degrading stereotype and transform it into a symbol of resilience. In the past, Anglo teachers would humiliate, I was part of this, humiliate Chicano children by searching their hair for lice in front of the class. The troupe adopted this negative symbol to build something positive. It was founded in 1970 by Tomás Frausto and Elda Cisneros. I believe they are the ones that are singing on the guitars on the bottom right. From the University of Washington, this guerrilla-style troupe that served as the cultural arm of El Movimiento, or the Chicano movement. I love, my favorite picture is the one on the left that says Jorge Zapata. This is Tony Castañeda, a friend of my husband's when he was in college, with his beautiful smile on his face. What I love about the Chicano movement, that the entire family participated. Here we have more pictures of protesting in Washington State, from Toppenish to farm worker children in Zilla, to Carlos Trevino who was part of the CMAR Museum, to college students. The college student group was called Mecha, and the Brown Berets that also joined anti-Vietnam protests. And just love the pictures of the young people at the bottom with their fists raised up high. So proud, fighting Chicano power. And I believe that sign that says "Make cops pay for racist murder" is in reference to the Salazar murder in California. Latine impact on Washington. When I see these pictures, I don't see farm workers. I see family. Oh. Washington had one of the largest migrant farm worker families or communities in the United States. In 1942, a series of diplomatic agreements between the U.S. and Mexico, known as the Bracero Program, allowed millions of Mexican, oh gosh, I didn't expect this, to work in the United States on short-term contracts rotating between different farms in different states. Talked about Braceros before, but they were here, the first ones that started making Eastern Washington community. Washington State was among the state's most used migrant agricultural labor. Solis was born, a woman named Solis that I'm going to talk about on the next slide was born and raised in Granger, where her parents met in the early 70s and where they eventually bought a small farm. Many migrant workers had decided to settle down get out of the state-to-state harvest cycle, and they had lived in camps. They began to start families, and she is the one who quoted on this next picture. Look at these beautiful families. I see moms, I see dads, I see children. I see myself in these beautiful pictures of families living together, working together, eating together, being in community together. This picture in particular is the one where Laura Solis, the woman I was just talking about, these were the first images that were put on Facebook. She went on Facebook and she saw and she says, I recognize this woman. That's my grandmother. And because of that, the face group got bigger and bigger, and the Irwin Nash collection started seeking out this Facebook group to identify families and people in these pictures. And this is where I went through the Facebook group, try to find the pictures that I used to try to identify the people that were in the pictures and added names where I could. This is Alicia Elizondo, cutting asparagus outside of Granger. I see a beautiful woman, mother, resilient, strong. In these pictures, having an asparagus cutting is hard work. I came from Idaho where we hoed sugar beets. My husband took me out into an asparagus field when we were first married. And I said, I'm a hard worker. I'm a farm worker. I can do field work. I didn't last an hour. I was in the middle of the field crying because of having to bend over and trying to figure out how to use this cuchillo or this knife to cut it correctly, because it is a skill. And more pictures of hop harvest through Granger. This was men and women. Women had to do everything in the home, nurture their children, and work, make the tacos before they went out, and work alongside the men. Here is a woman driving a truck. I wish I knew the names of all of these beautiful people that just show how long we've been doing this work and continue to do this work. Men and women working together in the hop fields of Granger. We created beloved community. Communities of belonging amidst all of the racism and the oppression and the bad farm work conditions. We still found beloved community in our communities of belonging. I love this picture, especially the elderly man that just has this beautiful smile on his face, that they are genuinely enjoying themselves and enjoying each other's company. I think they were watching one of maybe the Teatro del Piojo at the Sunnyside City Park. But it was a farm worker union meeting in 1972, and I just love the families, the abuelas, the tias, the mothers, the children. We do everything together, even go to a farm worker union meeting together. I love the smiles. And somebody identified two of the women as Simona and Connie Beltran, and the elderly man as Martin Yanes. And I haven't asked for any engagement for a moment, but if you want to open the chat, if you Noah family that has lived in Eastern Washington for generations and part of this farm worker community, feel free to put that last name of that family in the chat. Here we have Beltrans, Yanes, and our family, Esqueda and Casas. 3, 4 generations of families. I know Lolo too. Arevalo, Morales, Gamboa, Cantú, Solís. Diaz, Perea, Reyes, Cervantes, Sanchez. You guys are going to make me cry. Gonzalez, Flores. Yes, these are families that have been here for generations, that worked together, lived together, fought together. Hernandez. Thank you so much. You can turn it off. See, practiced it without any emotion until I actually did it. And this is Sunnyside. This is the Garcia family. Also one of the first pictures that was identified on that Facebook group. Nash said about these pictures, it was always people. That's who inspired the work of Jacob Reese, Louis Line, and Eugene Smith, who inspired him. The primary impetus is the relationship of people to themselves and to their environment. This is the picture of the hill in Sunnyside and the tower, the water tower that used to be asparagus fields, and now it's all wine, grape fields, grape vineyards. And this Garcia family, this is Juan Garcia at the top left. I was in California over Memorial Day weekend because I went to Legoland with my grandchildren, and I ran into Juan Garcia's daughter, Felicia, at the airport. And I'm going to talk about her and her daughter a little bit later, but we are still living here generations and generations later. We also created spaces for our kids to learn traditions and culture. La Escuelita Culture Center in Granger was founded in 1969 by the United Mexican American Students and University of Washington again students. It was established to foster positive Chicano self-image, teach Mexican American history, and preserve culture through Spanish language and games and folk dancing. And during the civil rights movement of the 60s, Mexican Americans in the Columbia River Basin recognized a deep need to preserve their heritage, which we still need today. That's why we remember. Granger was an epicenter of agricultural labor and the area's Chicano residents facing heavy economic and political marginalization. Activists like Tomás Villanueva, again, here's Tomás's names, and Emilio Aguayo started La Escuelita to counter this and preserve culture and empower farm workers to act as a grassroots, non-governmental hub, supporting union efforts, helping laborers access basic needs, and raising political consciousness. I think they believe that solo el pueblo sana el pueblo. The mobile farm workers clinics that were started also by these same activists. Oh, here it is. Solo el pueblo, literally sana el pueblo, because this was a medical mobile unit that went out to the labor camps because healthcare was not accessible for migrant and seasonal agricultural workers. They were denied basic healthcare, and they lived in these remote, underserved areas. So unions and activists and community groups banded together to bring medical services directly to the fields and improvise these medical mobile units that later evolved into the Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic that we know of today. They also had migrant dental clinics, again, because of the lack of access to healthcare and dental care for children. Farm workers were almost completely shut out of the system. And private doctors were too expensive. Preventative care was inaccessible. So these mobile units went to grade schools and met their needs there. And here it is, learning dental hygiene in 1974. I believe it was in Toppenish. And what is belonging without language and music and culture and radio? This is Herminia, my tocaya, Mendez, developed and hosted the very first Spanish language radio broadcast in the entire Pacific Northwest on KREW, which is now the location of Pepe's Bakery here in Sunnyside. Organizations wouldn't, including many Catholic churches, were careful not to welcome Spanish-speaking events either. So you know what Herminia Mendez did? she went and purchased her own dance and event hall called La Tropicana in Sunnyside. And she brought in Tejano and Mexican musicians for our community. I believe this is why families stayed here in Eastern Washington. They found a community of belonging within their own community where they could speak their language, enjoy their music, receive communication through their radio, and just enjoy each other and fight together and work together. Anthem of this music and farm worker movement was the song De Colores that we're going to hear. I have a treat at the end of our presentation of De Colores. It was the anthem, the music, the livelihood of not only the Delenos grape strike, it acted as a tool to unite Mexican and Filipino farm workers, to boost morale on the picket lines and draw national sympathy during that 5-year movement. It became the anthem of the farm worker movement. Many times sung together at protest lines, at farm worker meetings, and then just as family gatherings. I learned the song in school at a very young age. And the creation of Radio Cadena, the voice of the farm workers, needing a space to be able to communicate with our community. Was in 1979, La Voz del Campesino, the voice of the farm worker, providing Latinos and other minorities an avenue for communication. Faith communities were also important to us and created spaces of belonging. I don't know where this picture is from and how I got my hands on it, but these are migrant farm worker families in front of the church that I was married in many, many years later. Migrant farm worker families were away from home. They had traveled from Texas, Arizona, California, some from Montana and Wyoming. They found belonging in their faith communities. Whether it was a Pentecostal church like this one or the local Catholic church, faith communities were spaces where they could sing and worship in Spanish, eat traditional meals like tamales and enchiladas and pozole. They attended several times a week and literally lived, worked, and worshiped all week long with the same people, authentic communities of love and care and belonging. I do recognize some of the faces here. I've tried to find out if my husband is in this picture because I see his parents in this picture, but I haven't been able to figure that out. It might have been before he was born, but I do recognize some faces, so this wasn't that long ago. Also, many married within these same communities. That's why all these last names that were mentioned here in the chat, I'm sure many of those families married within each other's families. I'm not talking about intermarriage within the same family. Like for us, 3 Casas married 3 Esquedas. Even in my mom's home, I think 3 Garzas married 3 Garcias. So we were very tight knit. That we celebrated together, went to church together. Here's this beautiful picture of Cecilia Villanueva at her quinceañera with her mother Maria Elena Treviño Villanueva. And I believe at St. Joseph's Catholic Church. And here on the right, speaking of marriage within these communities, these 2 people were actually in that previous picture. Abel and Juanita Moya getting married in that church in Sunnyside. And of course, music has to always be included in our celebrations. This is Alejandro Rodriguez y Los Brillantes playing Tejano music at La Puerta Negra in Toppenish, because la cultura cura. Everyone has a comadre or compadre because of all of these traditional and religious-based celebrations that we had in our community, including posadas and other holidays that we all enjoyed together. By 1975, Sunnyside was then 35% Hispanic. And now, why do I share this story? Not only because of those beautiful pictures, but also because they align with my own story. So just quickly, just some pictures of my own journey, and you will see how it aligns with the stories of the so many families here in Eastern Washington. I was not raised in Eastern Washington. I am a product of Arizona, California, Texas, and Idaho. And in my research, found the only picture that I could find of my great-grandmother, Demetria Garza, in the middle, and my grandmother, Guadalupe Garcia, on her left. Because stories are points of connection. The story of the families in Eastern Washington resonate with my story. And that's why it's so important to share these stories, to create spaces of belonging, so that you know you are not the only one that lived this shared experience of migrant farm work. This is my lineage. This is my heritage. These are my paternal grandparents and my maternal grandparents. You can see our indigenous ancestry and heritage just in the phenotype, in the way that my grandparents, and especially my dad, in their features. You may have stolen our indigenous language. You may have tried to erase our indigenous tribe. But we are indigenous people of the Americas, and how can we be foreigners on the land of our ancestors? And the beautiful picture of my parents we were 4 girls, all girls. Sisters, a brave mother. I just give all credit to my mom, who carried the weight of nurturing and feeding and raising girls, preparing the meals for the day, watching her make burritos before we went out into the fields, coming home to cook and clean again, get us ready for school, and somehow still dreaming for a better life for her girls. Living these dual lives, where I had to go to a predominantly white school during the day, being one of the only Latinas in my class, and then I got to go home and have a space of belonging with my primas at the labor camp in Paul, Idaho, and my tios and my tias, who they chose to return to Texas, and we chose to stay. And that's why we were attending school in Idaho. Being bicultural and bilingual, celebrating quinceañeras, and also being part of the old-fashioned 4th of July parade at the Rupert Square as part of the drill team, assimilating, but yet trying to hang on to our roots, being pressured by our parents to stay within our culture, completely understanding why, but also being pressured to assimilate in other ways where we didn't feel like we belonged in either world. But I say, some say no, ni de aquí ni de allá, but I say, oh yeah, de aquí y de allá. Going through high school, staying friends with the friends that you made at the labor camp, friends from that similar lived experience, but also exploring new friendships and new spaces, because I was a nerd and I loved my calculus class and all my fellow nerds in my calculus class. Loved them. That was a different community, but both community nonetheless. And even when I went to college, trying to hang on to both. Yes, I mentioned Mecha. I was part of Wazoo's Mecha because the University of Idaho did not have a Mecha club. So me and my roommate would drive over to Pullman at Wazoo for baile folclóricos. Here I am. My roommate was the teacher. She's a professional baile folclórico teacher. Loaned me the dress, and I would go to the baile folclórico dances all over the place. And yet at the same time, because I love dance so much, I was also a University of Idaho Golden Girl on the dance team. Who does that? Living in both worlds and loving both of them alike, and owing it all to my mom, knowing that she gave me the confidence to believe that I could do anything. And here we are, still dreaming, pushing the next generation to get those degrees. And in return, they push us too. How much can we learn from the next generation? Here is my son getting his master's. Here is my daughter getting her master's. Here is my granddaughter getting her doctorate. They push me. They are the ones who push me to make me believe that I could go back and get my master's degree. And we are in good hands. This next generation is our future looks bright. They are scholars, they are entrepreneurs, they're skilled in trades, they have graduate degrees. They are teachers and principals and administrators and nurses and doctors and state employees and city and state officials and attorneys. Again, all of these people on the right are the third, fourth generation of Sunnyside farm worker families. My son is a city employee. Vicky is the first mayor, Latina mayor of the city of Sunnyside, standing in front of this beautiful painting by a person that I got to sit next to at a meeting, created by an indigenous woman. My daughter's best friend, Marthy, a Gates scholar who is now an attorney specializing in tribal law. My niece, who is a vice principal receiving the Golden Apple Award. And remember Felicia that I ran into at the John Wayne Airport in California? Felicia, the daughter of Juan Garcia, whose picture was seen here before. This is her daughter scoring over 1,000 points, receiving an academic and a sports scholarship, full ride to college for next year. I love this next generation and so proud. None of us did this alone. None of us did this because we picked ourselves up from our bootstraps. We did it because we had the apoyo of our families. We did it because we believe in community and familia and believe in helping one another and supporting one another. So even though the Declaration of Independence was not intended for all of us at the very beginning, I still believe that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And with this, I will now pass it to hopefully Lorraine Peterson's here. I promised you a special treat. We're going to end it. I'm gonna give Lorraine. Let Lorraine introduce what you're going to see next. Lorraine, are you here?
Hi, yes, I am here. I turned on my camera, but it doesn't look like you all could see me yet, maybe. Can you hear me?
Lorraine, there's a toggle on the top of your laptop. If you just move that toggle over to open up your camera.
My camera is open. It's okay. I think we'll be fine. First, I just want to thank Herminia because when we talk about community and we talk about the next generation, and I'm part of that next generation, and I'm already getting emotional. I want to thank Herminia because there's people like her that have come before us who encourage us and push us. Herminia will call me and say, hey, Lorraine, I need your help with this. And I am involved in all these things now because Herminia will call and say, I need your help. And I'm always like, yes, I will help you. What do you need from me? I'm there. And this is why I have been a part of many different things with DSHS and ESA and CSD, if you're familiar with our agency. Thanks to Herminia and thanks for her coming before us, putting things in place so that we could step in and take on that mantle. So thank you, Herminia. I'm also here because I am a product of the farm worker agricultural community of the Yakima Valley. My grandfather migrated to the Yakima Valley in like the early 70s, and he brought his family, my mom, and they found community and they decided to stay. My father, who you could see here in the video, he migrated in the early 80s for farm working. And his intention was, I'm going to do work and I'm going to make tons of money and I'm going to go back to Mexico. But he found community and he stayed and he met my mom and they fell in love and decided to get married and they decided to have me. But I've been a part of this farm worker community for, my entire childhood. I remember growing up and being a part and just being in the agricultural fields. My grandpa was a mayordomo for a foreman for the New Houses, if you're familiar with the New Houses in Sunnyside and their agricultural company, Dan Newhouse and all of them. So my grandpa was a foreman, and he, in the cherry season, they had lots of migrant workers come, and my grandpa had this, being the hustler that he is, had this bright idea to have my grandma sell lonche to the men during the cherry season, because they would come and migrate, and it was easier for them just to buy lonche. And so my grandma would sell lonche, and she would take all the grandkids. She watched us as young kids, and she would take all the grandkids with her to sell lonche. And being the eldest granddaughter, of course, it was my duty to help her. And I remember we would sell lonche to the men during cherry season, and I was the cashier. And I was always so nervous because I'm like 8, 9 years old, and these men are giving me like $50 bills, and I have to figure out the change. But it really helped me. It was some of the best learning experiences for me in my childhood, learning how to be responsible in that way. And I also started I call it my first business, because I noticed that these men, migrant workers, would buy extra soda. And so I told them, so then I figured out they were buying extra soda for later. And I'm like, how about if I just came back later with ice cold sodas for them, and sell them, out in the field. So I did that and I earned what I thought was a lot of money back then. But I share that I'm very proud to be part of the farm worker community in Yakima Valley. And my dad and I wanted to sing this song, De Colores, as Herminia mentioned. It was adopted by the United Farm Workers movement, and here it is.
Hola, mi nombre es Lorraine y aquí estoy con mi papá Elías, que está tocando la guitarra. Les vamos a cantar un canto que se titula De Colores. De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arco iris que vemos lucir. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Canta el gallo con el kirikiri, kirikiri, kiri. La gallina con el cara, 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 cara. Los pollitos con el pío, 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 y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí.
Everyone give Lorraine and her father some love. Thank you. See all the emojis, Lorraine. Just beautiful. Thank you so much. Lorraine, thank you so much for all of you for being part of our story time today. And I will open it up for questions. While we're waiting, and if I didn't say it earlier, I do believe that our biculture and bilingualism is a superpower, and that employers should pay attention to that skill because it is a skill set. that we offer in being able to adapt and be flexible and navigate different spaces just effortlessly, a skill that we've learned and earned from our lived experience. Yes, Lolo.
Okay, so let's start. I know, I told you it was going to get you emotional and got me emotional too. What efforts are underway to educate Washington farmers on this history? I know one who voted for deportation, and he claimed that migrant workers are the frontline workers, thus exempt from deportation.
Well, as far as efforts to educate, so many people have done such great work. It just doesn't get publicized. I was amazed at what I was able to find online. There's the Seymour Museum that hardly gets talked about in Seattle that has our farm worker history. The Irwin Nash collection was open at the Yakima Museum, featured it, and all of the pictures. I guess they even had a display of Herminia Mendez and the whole radio history of our community. And I didn't even know about it. Wazoo and Pullman also had a big display, which neither one of them, I believe, are up for display anymore because I think this was last year. But so much work online. In that same document, in my slide deck, I included links to all of the sources. But no, I don't think that there's like this mobilized effort of educating our community. We need to do it ourselves in the spaces that we have. Like our BRGs, we're trying to do that in our BRG space, is include some of these stories, share your stories as well, and find spaces in your faith communities also to share these stories.
Thank you, Amina. Let me go ahead and ask a question by Tony Greco. How do you feel we can teach, instill, inspire, and continue the active Chicano identity in younger generations with the current political pressures, lack of curriculum in schools, and constant othering faced by Latine folks? This feels like an uphill journey. Beautiful presentation, by the way.
Thanks, Tony. It does feel like an uphill journey. But you know, I'm just reminded of solo el pueblo, sana el pueblo. We can't depend on the systems to include our stories. They haven't before, and I don't think they will, much less now in the future. We have to mobilize, like the farm workers who had very little resources, they were able to mobilize. In the valley, we have so many more resources, but somehow missed that ability, capacity. This is why we need diverse workforces from all different generations, so that we can create those spaces. You know, we can have virtual escuelitas. I bet you there's a market for that for the next generation of children and grandchildren. Maybe that's what I'll do when I retire. To sign up for, you know, Chicano education classes. You're giving me ideas. I'm retiring in less than 2 years. Maybe you'll see this on an online platform near you. Because we have to do something, and it's going to be up to us in the community to do it.
Here's a question I actually love. Are any of the places you mentioned in your presentation, La Escuelita, Cultural Center, La Tropicana, which I absolutely remember, are the commemorative markers or ways that they remembered physically in the landscape?
Gosh, I have not been to those physical places. I know that Pepe's Bakery was the radio station just because I lived here when that happened and that transition happened, but I don't know that, you know, I'm going to suggest you should put a picture of Herminia Mendez up in your bakery to honor her in this space. Radio Cadena still exists. It's been remodeled, you know, it's still in Granger, it's still there, and it's still on the radio. La Escuelita, I actually did research to see if it still existed, and it didn't, because it felt like, I don't know who wrote it up, but that, and I'm sure it's capacity. People just can only do things for so long if the next generation will not pick it up. That the work was moved towards protesting and the Radio Cadena and communication via radio. And so we lost the Escuelita. I don't even know. I'm going to have to go to Granger and see if I can physically find it, find the building, because I don't even know where it was in Granger. But yeah, historical markers, right? For all of these places.
That's a cool
another
idea.
great idea.
Here's another question that's really cool. What is the best way for those of Mexican heritage or mixed heritage who were not raised with community to connect?
this is, as state employees, I just suggest the BRG space. This is what we try to do in our Latino Leadership Network space, is to center our community. And from the quote unquote no sabo kids to those whose Spanish is their first language, I think there's gifts in all of it. There's gifts in people who speak such fluent Spanish that it was their first language, and maybe first generation, that are still so connected to the traditions and the cultures of our community that you could teach the next generation. Are bilingual people who, like me, who kind of have lived in both worlds and have that skill of navigating both, what we can teach each other, and our community that doesn't speak the language, how much you have to offer to us about breaking the cycle, about some of those things that aren't so helpful in our community, teaching us to be open-minded about things that we don't talk about in our community. And love that about this next generation, that we can all learn from each other and use that space also to share history and to share knowledge without being offended, without feeling like you're being left excluded because this isn't part of your history. How can we just all learn together and learn from one another? It is never about exclusion. It's about inclusion and learning from each other.
Quick question. I don't know if we can get this on time, but Juan Alanis, who I know very well, thank you. Wondering if you're aware of Rogelio Rojas and what he's been doing involved with UW. About the same time you were at WSU, his imprints deep in healthcare of Latinos and low-income people, as well as Carlos Olivares, I think is what he's saying, with Yakima Valley Farmworkers Clinic.
Yeah, I'm aware of the work of the Farmworkers Clinic. My husband's uncle was actually on the initial board founding the Farmworkers Clinic, so I'm aware of that history with Carlos Olivares as well, and all of the wonderful work that they've done throughout the state of Washington, like from this one little mobile unit to many throughout the state. But so many people doing the work. Erasmo Gamboa, who has written tons of papers and books about our history, also found photos at both at Wazoo and UW about our history, and timelines everywhere. And Radio Cadena has some history, and so much there. I don't know everybody. Again, I wasn't raised here, so all of mine has just been from learning from stories from my husband and reading it, and just stories from people, because I have lived here for 37 years, even though I wasn't raised here.
Well, it's 10 a.m. I'm not sure we have time for another question,
Thank
do we?
you. Gracias por todo.
Okay, so we are now at the closing, and geez, could barely keep my emotions intact.